Hello everyone and welcome to Insurgency, a podcast that sails the insurgent waves and boards rebellious ships, diving deep into stories of rising communities of the ocean. And we explore how communities are turning the tides through survival, solidarity, and defiant mobility in an era where the oceans are no longer just a backdrop to history, but also a contested frontier of power and possibility. We're happy today to have on board with us on the podcast Mrs. Huwaida Arraf, human rights attorney and an activist. Actually, she's one of the founders of the International Solidarity Movement for Palestine and organizer of the Freedom Flotilla to Gaza. I think I can also call her friend, an old friend from the times of the ships, and I'm very happy and very honored to have her on the podcast. Hello, Huwaida. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you for your time. Today,
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you. To see you again, it's been a while.
Yeah, indeed, and it's very exciting to have you on board. With me, co-hosting this episode is Roua Chakaroun. She's a student of public policy and international affairs at the American University of Beirut. She's also a research assistant for this podcast and for the Insurgency Project at large, and we'll be leading this discussion with you today. Of course, you can imagine we want to learn from you about the past, but also about the present of the ships and more, your insights and your experiences from engaging the sea as a space for solidarity to Palestine. So, starting from that, I think it would be great if you can tell us a bit more about what happened in Malta a few weeks ago. There has been, of course, a preparation for yet another fleet, another flotilla to Gaza, and it has been ongoing somewhat secretly, or at least carefully, not to raise the suspicion, or at least to make itself too known to the powers that be. But nonetheless, there was practically few hours and not few days before its planned departure from Malta. There was drone bombing, right, on the ships. So
Yes.
please let us know. I mean, what happened there? What do you think? What is your take on the events?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I'll start by saying it's really unfortunate that we had to be quiet or secretive, if you will, about planning this, because when we first started to try to break the illegal siege on Gaza, we were able to leave with the support of the European country that we were leaving from. The whole idea was to go from European waters to international waters into Gaza's territorial waters, and not get into Israel's territorial waters, not to give Israel an excuse to attack or to stop us, because we wanted to challenge what continues to be an illegal and deadly siege on Gaza. Israel does everything, or what it tries to tell the world is it's done under the pretext of security, and that is false. If we have time, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but we wanted to highlight that we are not a security threat, and the people of Gaza have a right to receive us, and we have a right to sail. And so when we first started, we were able to leave from Cyprus, or we left from Greece, or we left from Turkey. And then over the years, these countries, at the request of, or in response to Israel and the United States, pressures from there, started stopping us or sabotaging us. And not only these countries, but beyond, really all of the countries in the Mediterranean, it became very difficult to leave from. Even the ones that claim to be very supportive of Palestine. Last year, we were in Turkey, Istanbul. We had 3 big ships, one of them a cargo ship loaded with over 5,000 tons of humanitarian aid. And the night before we were supposed to launch, we were sabotaged with the flag at first. The flagging country withdrew its flag, and then when we resolved that, Turkey did not allow us to leave for months, held our boats hostage, if you will. So at this time, we were not very public about the organizing. We wanted to wait until we were in international waters so that the country we were leaving from, in this case it was Malta, it would not stop us, create different ruses why we couldn't get out of port. And as you say, the night before, we were supposed, most of the volunteers were supposed to board. It was in the early morning hours of Friday, May 2nd. We had a little bit over 60 people from 20 different countries training in Malta, because we want to make sure that everyone is trained in the different scenarios that they might encounter. They were training in Malta, and our ship was called the Conscience. It was coming into Malta, but right outside of Maltese territorial waters, in international waters. We had 18 people on board, and like I said, more people were supposed to board and more humanitarian aid. We had some things on board, but the bulk was going to be loaded in Malta. A drone fired twice at least directly at the ship. Thankfully, no one was killed, but they could have been. It set the ship on fire. We had 4 people who were injured, but thankfully, again, not life-saving injuries. After a while, the crew on board, with the help of a tugboat, were able to put out that fire, but the response from Maltese authorities was very disappointing, and it points to, again, what I was saying in terms of these countries that are colluding with Israel, really to stop us. Not only are these countries, not upholding their own obligations to not support a country that is engaged in illegal acts, in war crimes, in collective punishment, in genocide now against Gaza. So they're not challenging the blockade, but then they're also stopping us from doing it. Again, colluding with Israel, and we know that pressures come from the United States. We've been asked, well, how do you know it was an Israeli drone that fired on your ship? We don't have physical, concrete information yet, but Israel is the entity that has been attacking us for years. In 2010, it killed 10 of our volunteers aboard the Mavi Marmara. And over the years, again, it has used violence to stop us from challenging its illegal siege on Gaza. And it is the entity that is most interested in stopping us and any humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza. So I think, are justified in saying that it most likely was Israel. And then after the bombing, we learned some other things that clearly point to Israel. And of course, Israel has not denied it. So I think we can be sure it was Israel. One more thing I'll touch on. I said Malta's response was disappointing. What happened is we tried to enter Maltese territorial waters, because you have a ship that's just been bombed. You have 18 people, civilians on board, who are shell-shocked and also worried because we didn't know were they going to be bombed again. They wanted to enter into Maltese territorial waters, and that was refused, repeatedly refused. The right to come in and dock so people could get off, so we could start repairing the ship and continue our mission to Gaza, and refused just the permission to just come in a few miles to be in Maltese waters and hopefully safer from another attack. Malta kept the ship right outside its territorial waters for over 2 weeks. I can just say yesterday, they did not let it in, but it was, we started moving the ship, and we finally got the crew who was on the ship off, hopefully home to their families now. But it is inexcusable response from Malta not to, in essence, they treated us as if we were the attackers, and not that we were a civilian ship, and an aid ship at that had just been bombed.
Yeah, unbelievable, unfathomable events, and I think they are also greatly unknown, right? I mean, there is not much publicity around what happened, despite the fact that all these events are just unfathomable and extremely extraordinary. You know what you just said, that these are human rights activists. There's a humanitarian disaster. There's an open, actually, genocide in Gaza, and there is a denial of humanitarian aid. So practically, you are doing what the UN should be doing, right? But also, the UN has been stopped. It's been blocked from helping. So, what do you think about the media attempts, or at least the media coverage of the story?
Yes, it has been shameful. I think the media has been really an active part of enabling Israel's genocide on Gaza, because they are part of really hiding from the world. Well, it can't be hidden, right? The people in Gaza are risking their lives and really live streaming it to us, but that's how we know, not coverage from the mainstream media. And of course, we have some very principled and courageous journalists, kind of more independent and alternative, not this corporate media, that if you would think about any other situation where an entire people, in addition to being systematically bombed and children torn to pieces for 19 months, we're seeing this, but now systematically starved, and Israel's not even denying it. It boasts about its plan to starve the people of Gaza of basic necessities. It should be on the front page. It should be headline news in every mainstream media outlet, and it's not. There is not a blip about it in mainstream U.S. media. And again, if it was any other people, it would be. The people who are doing this, Israel, would be criminalized and sanctioned, but none of this. And now, even with the attack on the flotilla, we want to make sure that we're not the story. What's happening in Gaza is the story, but we are the story in that we're highlighting how complicit the rest of the world is, and especially these, first and foremost, the United States, but also these surrounding countries, and also countries that say that they are supportive. They should be the ones refusing to abide by Israel's control over Gaza. Long before this genocide started or accelerated to this rate, Israel maintained an illegal blockade on Gaza that was a form of collective punishment that was causing a disastrous effect on the civilian population. And numerous human rights experts, there is no question this blockade is illegal. And countries, mainly Western countries, but of course beyond, not only didn't do anything about it to defy the blockade, they didn't sanction Israel. And like I said, they weren't really much talking about it until after kind of October 7th, and even then taking on the Israeli narrative. And even now, we are starting to hear more condemnation, but words aren't enough. Israel has created really a death camp in Gaza, and the walls of that death camp need to be breached. They need to be torn down. I even have been saying, there are all of these trucks outside of Rafah waiting to get in. Wherever you are, you need to just go and not wait for Israel's permission. Israel is on trial for genocide, for attempting to really annihilate the entire population of Gaza. And so to allow that country to control whether the people trying to survive are able to get food or medicine is outrageous. And yet that's what this kind of world system is allowing to happen. And so one of the things we're saying as civil society, our governments are failing. We are going to sail. Even if it's a threat to our lives, we can't allow this to happen. And we hope that others will follow in defying this illegal siege. But, none of the countries, not even Malta, really condemned Israel's attack, which was essentially a terrorist attack in European waters. Is a terrorist attack in European waters We didn't hear a condemnation from any European country. And like I said, the media is part and parcel of doing that, of keeping it from the world. And so Israel continues doing what it wants to do, and that's get rid of the Palestinian people. So we have so many layers of complicity here.
Speaking of media, some critics have questioned the long-term impact of the flotilla and similar maritime efforts. So I wanted to ask, in your view, what were the concrete outcomes of this kind of action, and what lessons can be drawn for present-day solidarity movement?
So, if people want to critique and say, well, what aid can we bring to Gaza, for example? Our boats were carrying aid. We try to fill our boats with aid, but that's not the goal in terms of, we can't even physically carry the amount of aid that Gaza needs. We have experts that are saying Gaza needs 600 trucks a day just to meet the bare minimum of the people trying to survive there. Israel is into its third month of not even allowing one truck in. It just allowed in a symbolic 5 and says it's going to allow in a little bit more, but again, doesn't even come close. It's not even a drop in the ocean. And so what I want to make clear is, while we try to carry much needed life-saving aid, the solution is to open all of Gaza's borders, to let the people of Gaza control what gets in, or even in the meantime, let humanitarian organizations do their work. Our goal is to challenge what is an illegal, deadly blockade that has been in place for almost 2 decades now, and even longer, that Israel has controlled Gaza. And you have a ruling from the International Court of Justice saying that Israel's control, its presence in the West Bank, including Jerusalem and Gaza, is unlawful and must come to an immediate end. And all countries, part of the United Nations, the world system, have an obligation not to recognize the illegal situation that Israel has created, and have an obligation to do what they can, meaning using pressure on Israel to help bring this situation to an end. And they are not doing that. And so we want to be, in a sense, this driver of action that says we can't continue to accept what Israel wants to do, denying an entire people their freedom, and now really engaged in a genocide, while the world just sits by idly and watches. So when our governments fail, we are going to step up. And yes, we are a handful of activists. We are maybe a small boat. Israel's bombing of our boat a few weeks ago is not going to stop us. We are planning to go again. And we're trying to show also that Israel is not, we can't give in to this might is right. Israel has the guns. It's willing to use them to bomb us, to bomb civilians, to bomb us in international waters, that we are going to give in to this. So we are part of a global movement that is trying to do what it can, from marching in the streets to engaging in boycotts to taking to the sea, to challenge what is an unlawful, illegal, and morally bankrupt policy that has been enabled by the global community. So what have we done? I think, we were able to, I would say, we reframed initially Gaza's blockade. It's not a localized security matter, but it's a form of collective punishment. It's a violation of international law, and we are pushing our own governments to get involved, to try to say something, and to really reckon with the human impact of what Israel's policy is and has been. We are exposing the complicity of states like the US and the EU in really maintaining the siege, and we're hopefully laying the groundwork for broader direct action. Now we are in connection too with those who are mobilizing a global march to Gaza to try to get in through the land borders. We're doing it via the sea. showing that we can't be silent. And I hope the people of Gaza, first and foremost, are getting that message, in that the law in our countries may have abandoned them, but certainly the people of the world are not.
Thank you so much for this extensive answer. And I have a question related to something you already mentioned, related to how maritime actions like the flotilla confront not only physical barriers but also legal and narrative ones. So what role has international law played, positively or negatively, in shaping or limiting such efforts?
It's a good question. International law in general is, it's not a savior. It's not something we direct all our energies on, because there are lots of problems with it. First and foremost, I think everybody knows it, that there is no enforcement mechanism. We have the International Court of Justice that ordered Israel to stop committing acts of genocide against Gaza, including stop depriving Gaza of food and medicine, and in 3 separate orders, which are legally binding, and Israel has not complied, because the enforcement comes back to states and the political will of these states to enforce. And so international law in general, this is not to say that we should abandon it, we should work to strengthen it, but Israel and the United States right now are trying to totally destroy it. When it comes to maritime actions like the flotilla, on one hand, we can say it offers like critical normative tools for justifying these efforts. We make sure those of us organizing the flotilla that we do everything legally. And when you're looking at international law, we are highlighting that there is a legal prohibition on collective punishment under the Fourth Geneva Convention. There is a right to, when it comes to the seas, a freedom of navigation in international waters, and Israel is violating that by stopping and attacking us in international waters, in European waters. We usually use the framework of international humanitarian law because that is really what should be a protection for civilians, and it is not serving to protect Palestinian civilians. And Israel has been working really to trample all over to do away with these kinds of protection to international humanitarian law in general, because it slowly but systematically violates all of almost one step at a time. In all of the years that I work in Palestine, I've seen how it starts one place, then it escalates, and it sees there are no repercussions. It's not facing any kind of sanctions. It escalates, and now it has destroyed really everything. There's not much left, and we are fighting that. And we use these legal frameworks to enable us to ground our actions in legality, to highlight that we are actually abiding by and working to safeguard international law up against this rogue entity that is consistently violating it and is systematically killing and destroying an entire people as they are doing it. On the other hand, there is, as I mentioned, this selective enforcement and this politicization of international law, and that is what limits its protective functions. If countries don't have the political will or aren't pressured to act, then they won't. And this is what we always say, how law and activism, and really comes back to even why I became a lawyer after being an activist, and now I make sure to identify myself as both, because you need the activism, the civil society mobilization to create the political will, putting the pressure in their own countries to do what they need to do to uphold international law. That's what's been severely lacking. But it ends up being kind of this double standard where we're invoking international law, and it's us, who are trying to be legal in everything we do and using international law as the framework in which we work, And yet we are attacked and we are kind of criminalized, like I said, by these countries that try to block us and stop us and treat us as if we are the ones doing something wrong. And those who are violating international law are enjoying impunity. So we are going to keep doing what we're doing, and we hope the mobilization in other ways in all of these different countries and people who want to support us continue to do the pressure work that they're doing in their own countries. Because for this to work, it's not only who can be on a flotilla, who can be on this boat. It's the action that it inspires, and the people who are supporting what they're doing in their own home countries to support our mobilization that makes it more effective. Did I answer your question?
Absolutely.
Yes, of course.
I think, Huwaida, I want to ask you to go back a bit in time, and sail us through, how you discovered the sea as a space for political solidarity to Palestine. Having said that, of course, I should add that it's not the first time. The Palestinians have been always, imagining the sea as a space for return, and either in a kind of a abstract or much more practical kind of, operational way, going back to the Al-Auda ship in the 80s. I'm sure you can tell us something about that, but I just want you to sail us through, so to say, the story. How did you end up discovering, or at least, rediscovering the sea as a space for Palestine solidarity in 2008 or 2007, around that time? And if you can, all the way to today somehow, what is actually the main element that the sea gave to the movement of solidarity for Palestine?
I wish I could tell you that it was something that was well studied and well planned, in line with also the history of Palestinians trying to use the sea, or imagining the sea as a vehicle for return. And as you mentioned, the Auda ship, which I think it was in 87, 88, it was also an attempt by the Palestinian Liberation Organization to sail also back home to Palestine, and that ship was bombed by Israeli forces before it even left port. And so that, this attacking civilian ships is definitely not new to Israel. But for us, it was more deep frustration with the way that the world was not acting to uphold international law, to protect Palestinian lives. It was 2007, as you mentioned, Israel had tightened its closure regime on Gaza, and so not only has it always controlled Gaza, but now it started severely limiting things that could get in and out. And at the time, Israeli leaders called this putting Gazans on a diet. And there is evidence to show that they were counting really how many calories the Palestinians in Gaza could survive on, and using that to determine how much food aid they were going to allow into Gaza, and other ridiculous restrictions that have, again, absolutely nothing to do with security, but have to do with punishing an entire civilian population, collective punishment, and using these forms of collective punishment as a way to exact political concessions, and to do what Israel has long been doing or trying to do, is to get the Palestinians to stop seeking their freedom and to accept subjugation. So it is, when I think maybe many of your listeners might understand more than, let's say, a superficial understanding that our governments have been trying to give, and that Israel-Palestine is this kind of conflict over piece of land by these two entities, as opposed to what it really is Israel being founded as this settler colonial project, which settler colonialism, in order to succeed, you need to replace the indigenous population and replace it with your own. population. And if people go back into the writings of Israel's early founders, they will see some of those discussions about what to do with the indigenous population. But over the years, after Israel's founding in 1948, Israel has implemented these policies designed to continue to get rid of the Palestinian people. They drove out 750,000 with their founding, and then and they killed thousands, and since then have been trying to make it difficult for Palestinians to stay on their land. So either you leave or you accept this system of domination that we have created, where Israel is going to make, controls everything, and then the Palestinians live as, again, a dominated, controlled people. And it has only escalated that over the years because it has never faced any repercussions. And these decades of no sanctions, no repercussions for everything that it's done to Palestinians is why we see Israeli leaders and even their soldiers kind of smug about what they're doing, even exposing the most horrific war crimes. But to go back to your question, so we were frustrated even back then. Israel tightened its noose on Palestinians in Gaza. The UN was issuing reports saying that the economy is destroyed. People are the most vulnerable in Gaza, were suffering. You had rising rates of malnutrition in children. You had stunted growth. You had high rates of anemia in pregnant women. All of this from not getting adequate food and not getting adequate medical care, because that's another thing that Israel has long denied entry into Gaza, is certain kinds of medicines and medical equipment. And then people were dying because they couldn't get these medicines, and Gaza didn't have the medical equipment to treat patients. But these reports weren't enough. Like, who is doing anything? Nobody. And so volunteers, we were volunteers with the International Solidarity Movement. We were having a call about what's possible to do in Gaza, because we had long volunteered and had a presence in Gaza, but after Israel killed our volunteers in 2003, it ran over and killed crushed to death with a bulldozer, an American volunteer, Rachel Corey. Within the same time frame, it shot and killed one of our British volunteers, Tom Herndal. It stopped allowing us, the International Solidarity Movement, into Gaza. So we couldn't get in. It was totally sealed off. People were dying and countries weren't doing anything about it. So what could we do? And then one of our volunteers said, why don't we try to get to Gaza from the sea? Why don't we try to sail a boat? And I honestly originally thought it was a crazy idea, because we didn't have a boat. We didn't have money to get a boat. We didn't know anything about boats. And so I initially really dismissed it, but as we kind of continued to see the international community doing nothing, we thought we had to try. And so we set to work really trying to obtain a boat. And our first effort to sail to Gaza was in the summer of 2008. We managed to get 2 fishing boats that we fixed up and converted, and it carried 44 civilians from about 17 different countries around the world. We set sail to Gaza, not really thinking that we would actually be able to get in, because Israel knew about our efforts. It was saying there's no way they're letting us in, they're going to stop us. But we also said, we're not turning back. And if nothing else, we'll expose to the world that what you're doing has nothing to do with security, because we don't constitute a security threat. And at the last minute, while we were at sea, Israel backed down and decided not to confront us. And so in August of 2008, I was actually aboard one of those boats that became the first boat to reach the shores of Gaza in over 40 years of Israeli military occupation without Israel's permission. And it was a phenomenal feeling and a phenomenal reception that we received in Gaza, not because we were carrying aid, which the people of Gaza really desperately needed, but because a people who are entirely trapped and know that this system, Israel, is trying to annihilate them, see average civilians taking to the sea and doing what they can to try to reach them and to challenge Israel's unlawful policy. So a long way of saying it wasn't kind of planned or came from anything that had to do with our recognition of the sea as some form of a vehicle of liberation, and it was more
just looking at the map. Yeah, looking at the map and say, okay, there is another road that we haven't taken yet, right? I guess.
We couldn't reach, Rafah. Egypt has been part of imposing this siege. Israel ultimately controls, but certainly Egypt doesn't have to abide by Israel's diktats. It could open Rafah, and it didn't. And the other ways to get to Gaza through Israel, which is, we couldn't. People were blocked in every way. So we said, let's try the sea in this way. And we've continued ever since.
And I want to ask about that continuation. So you also came in touch then, this decision brought you in touch and brought you in conversation and in actually co-activism, let's say, in cooperation with different tribe of people, right? Like the people of the sea, sailors, captains, people at port workers, all of this world that was practically, of course, aware of what was happening, but it became much more active, much more involved. Right? I mean, we did have, of course, we had cases of port actions. We still have port actions, at embargoes or boycotts or even of strikes, all different kinds of mobilizations and protests about the ships that bring goods or even weapons to Israel. But for the first time, I think we didn't have the opposite kind of ships that were bringing also humanitarian aid and political message to Palestine and Gaza. So how did this relationship evolve, and develop with the people of the sea, mostly professionals, of course, working around the maritime element? I mean, did how did they react to this, or if you remember, telling them about that, and how did your relationship with some of these people developed,
Oh, that's kind of, it's multifaceted. Yes, of course, it brought us into a whole new realm of mobilizing with I think people that we had not previously had strong relationships. I think was it about that time that we met also I remember when we were trying to find captain and crew for our ships, we needed kind of professionals in this area, and we weren't at all. And at the same time, you had to be a professional in this area, but you also had to know that you're potentially risking your life. You're going to challenge the Israeli Navy at sea and not abide by its orders to turn back. So in a way, these discussions did happen about why we were doing these things that we were doing. And I remember, especially with, a lot of our Greek crew, a strong solidarity. And even when some of them did not have a complete grasp on what was happening, what Israel was doing, what was happening in Gaza, after these discussions felt firm solidarity and decided that they were going to, and they needed to be part of this action. And I remember clearly some of the reaction of these professionals when, with our first few missions, we were able to get to Gaza. It was profoundly life-changing, I think, for a lot of people to see, again, an entire people who have been trapped in this huge prison or concentration camp, and while Israel not only kind of batters and pummels them, but tells the world it's about security and tells the world that these are violent people, etc. And then to have the people of Gaza receive us so warmly, it was a lot of learning. And in terms of the other groups that you mentioned, kind of dock workers and what's happening with these groups that are mobilizing to put the kind of pressure, economic and otherwise, on not only on Israel, but on companies that support Israel, that became, I think, kind of an organic solidarity and a way to grow. If I'm not mistaken, one of the first times that came about, trying to block Israeli ships or refuse to unload Israeli ships or weapon ships, was in 2010 after Israel attacked the 2010 Freedom Flotilla, and it killed 9 of our volunteers on the spot, and 1 volunteer lay in coma for 9 months, and then he died. So it killed 10 of us, it brutalized the rest, and it kind of sparked all kinds of different civil society actions, and one of them was our supporters work building on the connections that they have been working on building with unions and with dock workers and with others to do this kind of action in response, and that's continuing and that has escalated. But it's part of the growing movement of people who can't really look away anymore. And wherever you are, I think the question is, what can we do to stop these horrors? It's a genocide that's not too much different from what we learned about in history, right, when the world didn't do anything. And right now, we see it happening in real time. It's happening on our watch. And the question for everybody needs to be, what can I do about it? And from that, we're seeing all of these different actions being amplified, and hopefully much more to come.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for all the obvious sacrifices you had to give for this flotilla and the brutality that was faced by. So I've been meaning to ask about the categorization of the flotilla. Some people see it, it's often described as a humanitarian mission, but others see it as an act of political solidarity. So from your perspective, what distinguishes humanitarian aid from political solidarity in the first place? And why is that distinction important, especially when dealing with the brutality of Israeli army, for example?
Yeah, from my perspective, the distinction between humanitarian aid and political solidarity is it's real. And from the moment we started, we insisted, we're not a humanitarian aid mission. We are human rights activists. We're human rights organizations. We are insisting on the right of Palestinians to live free and to be able to move, to work, to feed their families. Palestinians don't want to live on aid, so we're not interested in perpetuating that. But I do admit that it becomes, in a situation like this, that distinction becomes blurred because we need to do what we can to try to meet the immediate needs of people to be able to survive. They don't have food, they don't have medicine, they don't have clean water. And so when we had last year a cargo ship, we filled it with as much as it could carry. And now our ship that was bombed a few weeks ago, the Conscience, it wasn't a cargo ship. It was a civilian vessel because our cargo ship is still detained. But we tried to fill it. We're going to fill it with as much as we can carry because we have to meet these immediate humanitarian needs, and we have to highlight the detrimental humanitarian impact resultant from very political decisions and when political actions are not challenged. And so we are, while we highlight and want to meet these immediate humanitarian needs, we are challenging the conditions that create those needs in the first place. And we understand and we reinforce the fact that we have to change the political climate, the politics that leave Palestinians in need in the first place. As I said, we've always been about the latter, but in this kind of situation here, it is blurred. But I will kind of reinforce again, Palestinians and no people want to live on aid. They want the ability to live free, to live with dignity, to be able to work and feed their families. And Palestinians consistently tell us that. We don't want charity. We want you to stop enabling our oppressors. And that's what the international community of states has been doing. And we're challenging that. And it definitely has a humanitarian component to it, but it's more about changing the political realities that leave Palestinian in the situation that they are in need of right now, life-saving aid.
Huwaida, thank you so much for this amazing insight. And I think people would like to ask you, I can imagine that listening to you, listeners would like to know more about your plans. You said that there is a plan to go ahead, and also maybe, as you said, the Palestinians want help to stop the aggression. So what would you say to those who would like to take action? How would they? Okay, if they don't have a boat, let's say. What else could they do to help, to support, and to stop to support the Gaza and to stop the genocide?
So thank you for the opportunity to talk about that. We are currently planning to sail again, and we are not going to have the huge boats that we had last year. Still, even our conscience hasn't been repaired, the one that Israel recently bombed. But we are not going to stop. And so hopefully in the next few weeks, you will see another effort to try to get to Gaza. And we invite sailors, mariners, anyone in the region to really join us. If you have a boat, kind of get on it and join us when you hear that we've left. We'd love to see hundreds of boats, not just ours, heading towards Gaza. And this is really the kind of action that we are trying to inspire, and that is really incumbent on the world to engage in when we are witness to such horrors. But in terms of people who are listening, please do keep up with us. When we are sailing and with the confronting Israel's threats, it helps when we have all eyes. When we say all eyes on deck, basically people watching, people sharing the news that we put out. And so you can find us on really almost all social media platforms. If you look up Freedom Flotilla, and on our website, freedomflotilla.org, many of the Freedom Flotilla is a coalition of national campaigns. So we have a U.S. campaign, a Swedish campaign, a Turkish campaign, South African, Malaysian, all of these. So you might even have, depending on where people are listening from, they might even have their own national campaigns that they can get involved in, and they will see links to those on the main Freedom Flotilla website, so freedomflotilla.org. And ours is one way, and we hope to have people's support. But what is most important, I think, is for everybody to assess where they are, what country they're in, where do they work, what can they do? And it's not always being at the front of a march or being on board a ship, but there is something everybody can do. Even if it's today, just calling, your member of parliament, or talking to your neighbor, or, informing a new person about what's happening, because we need to spread education and awareness about what's happening. We talked about just how much the mainstream media is complicit, so we need to work to bypass that and then transform that knowledge into political action. So just think, where are you and what can I do? Even if it's just sharing our information today. Maybe today you couldn't do much else, but every day people can do something, and I hope they will. And lastly, I would say that we've been talking and focusing, of course, on Gaza because of just how horrific this situation is, but it's also very, very, very bad in the West Bank, and Palestinians in the West Bank, and even in other parts of supposedly that are citizens of Israel are fearful that this is what's happening to Gaza is coming to them next. It's escalating in the West Bank, and it might soon also kind of reach Palestinian citizens of Israel. So the international solidarity movement is still operating in the West Bank, so largely in the West Bank. And so I would encourage people who want to try to travel to the area to look up the International Solidarity Movement as one of the ways that you can go and volunteer and witness and document and be there in solidarity with Palestinians literally struggling to survive and to stay on their land. So many different ways to get involved, and I hope everyone listening will, because it's going to take all of us.
Thank you, Huwaida. I think that's the best way to end this podcast. Thank you for your time. I know that you have also another obligation afterwards, but I think we definitely navigated the waters and also the lands under occupation and hopefully under liberation soon. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights.
Thank you so much for your efforts and for joining us today.
And thank you all for listening.
I appreciate so much. I've got to say that what you all doing podcasts and doing all of this kind of media, independent and otherwise, that is really exposing what our mainstream media and governments are trying to hide. It's been one of really is such an important way for people to get information aside from what Palestinians are broadcasting to us. And so you are doing such tremendous work, and I'm just honored to have been given a chance to talk about what we're doing also. And hopefully all of our work will continue to work together to defeat these horrors and usher us into better days, inshallah.
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Thank you for the inspiration too. Take care and keep up the fight. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.